Hey everybody, I'm Daniel from Spacedock, and this is the Starfleet Argo Excursion Buggy from Star Trek Nemesis. Ostensibly, it is a scout rover for use by planetary away teams, meant to allow crews to more quickly explore nearby environments and carry out the usual scientific and logistics assignments that away teams in Star Trek are generally called upon to perform. The only problem is, everything about it suggests that it is completely useless in this role, and frankly can't really justify its own existence. The first and most obvious point, I should think, is that it's open top, and therefore quite clearly not airtight. Immediately this removes a vast number of planetary environments in which this can be effectively used. It can only be used in Earth-like atmospheric environments, or environments in which the crew members can survive under normal circumstances. It doesn't seem to even have any kind of wind shield or dust shield or anything like that, forcing all of the crew on board to wear ballistic goggles. Even, apparently, Mr. Data, who is of course an android with synthetic eyes. Not having a sealed internal environment also prevents it from being used as a shelter or as a heat source on ice planets or other such situations. I mean, you wouldn't even be able to keep the crew dry if it started raining. For that reason alone, it wouldn't be able to perform an away mission to Great Britain, let alone a Class Y planet. You'd be out of luck if you tried to use this rover to collect any kind of samples for scientific analysis. It has one small footlocker on the back, just large enough for some Android components, and an even smaller storage compartment between the two seats that they can just about fit a severed Android head inside. It carries no scientific equipment of any kind, and doesn't even seem to be loaded with any kind of tools or sensors or other useful handheld equipment that a team might not necessarily want to carry around all the time. Speaking of the team, this vehicle can carry only 3 crew members, 2 in the front cab bit, and a third on this strange elevated roll bar section at the back. This is less than the conventional size of a Starfleet away team, and that's not even counting the people who would presumably stay with the shuttle that dropped this thing off. The vehicle does seem to be rather fast, and can quite handily deal with some difficult terrain under stressful circumstances, as we see in this flagrant defiance of the Prime Directive when the crew of the Enterprise get into a Mad Max Dune buggy combat sequence with some random aliens. It's at this point that we learn the Argo has a rear-mounted plasma cannon thing, which seems to have an extremely narrow firing arc, isn't raised high enough to be turned to fire off the sides of the vehicle or ahead of the vehicle, and can pretty much only engage something at close range that happens to be chasing you in a straight line. This thing also takes up a huge portion of the vehicle's mass, which seems hugely uncharacteristic of Starfleet, as it leaves this rover with more of its frame dedicated to combat purposes than just about anything else, without even being very good in combat. The cannon itself seems to be at least okay. It knocks over some dune buggies in the scene, though frankly, given that we're in a world where anything can be vaporized with a handheld weapon, I'm not sure what kind of scale this should be measured on. It's also worth pointing out that in the 24th century Federation, driving wheeled vehicles is presumably not a commonplace skill. Introducing a rover like this into Starfleet service would require you to train people who have only ever beamed around or been carried around by shuttles and public transport their entire lives. That's not to say that a rover for away team use is inherently a bad idea. I think it could be a great idea, especially for extended missions or if it's being assigned to a planetside base or something like that. But this vehicle is quite clearly the result of design by script philosophy, something that we've seen in the most recent Star Wars film, I think, with the First Order mandated dreadnought. This Argo buggy does and is exactly what the script needs it to be. It has a gun that can fire only in the exact place that Worf needs to fire the gun in the script. It has exactly enough storage space to carry the exact components that it carries in the script, and it's not airtight because they don't go to a planet that would require that in the script. When designing something like this, more consideration should be given to how this object fits into the world as described in the narrative, and how useful it would be in more circumstances. I seriously doubt the Enterprise E carries 15 different rovers, each of which is configured differently for a type of environment, and this one just happens to be the open-top dune buggy version. There are extremely few scenarios in which a shuttle pod or shuttlecraft would not be orders of magnitude more useful than this rover, and in the few situations where a rover would be a useful asset, a far better designed one than this would be needed. Something with a large back compartment which features some scientific areas, some workstations, something that can carry consumables for weeks, maybe has some transporter enhancers and some communications equipment, doesn't necessarily need to have any weapons of any kind really, but would allow for a prolonged long-range mission for an away team, or a useful asset to expand the mission profile of a base for use in surveys or sample collection or transporting cargo. Please let me know in the comments below if you have any good ideas for a Starfleet rover, if you have any sketches or designs of how this could be made better. If you do come up with anything like that, please do tweet it to @SpacedockHQ on Twitter. I love seeing stuff like that, and I'm sure many of you could do a far better job developing ideas for a Starfleet rover than was done in this movie. Thank you for listening. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off.
I will always be puzzled by the human predilection for piloting vehicles at unsafe velocities.
Thank you for watching Spacedock. Please remember to like, subscribe and share for more science fiction spacecraft summaries. If you enjoy the channel, why not consider pledging your support on Patreon? For just $1 a month, you'll be able to access the Spacedock schedule to see what's coming up.